G'day nerds. So today we're going to have a look at primary and secondary sources. What are they, so to speak? Um, our learning goal is that by the end of this, what we really want you to be able to do is to differentiate between whether or not something is simply a primary or a secondary source. Here's your vocabulary. If I can just get you to write this down, and that pause the video, write down, and we'll have to refer back to as we move through the lesson. So, what is a primary source? Here we have Marie Curie's notebook. Interesting. These are cool because you're still not allowed near them. You wouldn't be allowed near them anyway, but you're still not allowed to touch them as a researcher because they are highly radioactive. Just to sort of work out how serious what she was dealing with was. So primary sources provide a first-hand account of an event or time period. Okay, in science, we're often thinking of experiments, right? But this could be stuff that happened at the time, like a historical document. So these are considered to be authoritative. In other words, this is what happened at the time, and they represent original thinking, reports on discoveries or events, or they can share new information. So when we talk about secondary sources, we're often looking at analysis or interpretation or a restatement of primary sources. For example, a news article is often a secondary source. These are considered to be persuasive. In other words, they're analyzing something to talk about what's going on. So they're there to persuade an argument. A really common source is the editorial. So what if something is both, right? A rhetoric or a speech, right? So someone's standing up and they're giving a great speech to encourage you to do X. Now, this is an artifact of a moment, of a thing. So any recordings of this, transcripts of what was said, these are primary sources. But the speech itself, as it's a rhetoric, it's an analysis of something, that's a secondary source. So things can be both, and it just depends on how we're using them, how we're accessing them. So here are some examples. Primary sources, thinking of things like lab reports. Sorry, forgot how to speak there. Contemporaneous, which means of the time, diaries and journals. But even then, they can border into that secondary source. Photographs at the time, original documents. These can be anything like a receipt, right? We want to talk about did a person, have an alibi? Well, here's a receipt of where they are. That's a primary source. Birth certificates, newspaper adverts. That's really interesting. So advertisements within a paper. That's a primary source of what it was like at the time. Academic journals reporting new research. Case law. So this is what's happened in a court case, etc. Artworks are primary sources, like the artwork itself. Whereas analysis or books that interpret that artwork, that's going to be a secondary source. Academic journals analyzing new research, apparently I'm going from the bottom up. Newspaper editorials, encyclopedias where they're analyzing an idea and putting it forward. That's an analysis of secondary resources. That's an analysis of primary research and giving you a secondary source. Dictionaries, textbooks. So this is where we like to talk about Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is indeed a secondary source, sometimes tertiary, meaning third level, and so forth, depending on what it's citing. But yeah, anyway, so those are primary and secondary sources. And I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. We'll get back to you as quick as we can. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.